The folding top hinge plate is fastened to the body with 3 bolts. The installation position of the hinge plate is determined during production by the installation position of the folding top anchor plate. The anchor plate is fastened to the body with 2 bolts independently of the hinge plate. A special gauge is used to ensure correct adjustment of the folding top. Using the gauge, the hinge plate and anchor plate can be positioned correctly relative to one another. Unlike during production, however, the hinge plate is correctly positioned first and then the anchor plate. Adjustment of the 2 folding top anchor plates may be necessary if the bolt seal is no longer intact or the bolts are loose. If there is structural damage to the body, for example due to a collision, or if the folding top has been damaged. Generally, only experienced specialists with appropriate training should attempt to repair the folding top. To carry out measurements with the gauge, the vehicle must be standing on a flat surface. For servicing work on the folding top, the service literature describes defined folding top positions. First, move the folding top into position 3. Remove sun visors, interior lighting and the roof front header panel trim. This allows access to the anchor plate fastening bolts and the hinge plate on both sides. Detach the carpet trim from the cross member so that the spindles of the gauge can rest directly on the body panel. Remove the chrome trim on both sides. Now, place the gauge on the body, first at the front, then at the back. The gauge should rest on the body at 3 points, on the right and left of the roof front header panel, and centrally at the back on the cross member. If the gauge does not rest correctly at the front, loosen the 6 Torx bolts securing the latch strikers. This compensates for production-related tolerances. Push the loosened latch striker inwards and forwards, then bolt it tight again so that the latch striker is correctly adjusted. Now, stabilize the gauge with the 2 spindles. Don't use the spindles to position the gauge. On both the passenger and driver sides, 3 measurements are performed. First measurement: distance between the gauge and the body side outer panel. Second measurement: distance between the gauge and folding top hinge plate. Third measurement: distance between the gauge and sloping face of the folding top hinge plate. Caution: both sides are measured and adjusted independently of each other. The measured values are determined using a feeler gauge and a vernier caliper. In order to combine different leaves, simply detach them from the feeler gauge. The selected feeler gauge combination should slide snugly into the gap without exerting pressure. This time it fits. A vernier caliper helps to establish the precise measured value. Measured values 1 and 2 must match. A tolerance of plus or minus 0.5 millimeters is acceptable. In this case, measured value 2 doesn't match measured value 1, and measured value 2 doesn't lie in the tolerance range of plus or minus 0.5 millimeters, meaning that the hinge plate and then the anchor plate need to be repositioned. Measured value 1 is the reference value for measured values 2 and 3. Measured values 2 and 3 are listed in the service literature. If the anchor plate and hinge plate are correctly adjusted, values 2 and 3 from the table should match the actual measured values. On the basis of the table, select a feeler gauge combination for measured value 3 and check the actual gap size. Here too, the actual value does not match the reference value. Fasten the feeler gauge combination to the sloping face of the hinge plate. Then loosen the 3 hinge plate fastening bolts. A second mechanic should hold the hinge plate. Loosen the 2 anchor plate bolts and position the hinge plate. The feeler gauge combination corresponding to measured value 2 must fit snugly into the associated gap. The fastened feeler gauge combination measured value 3 must also fit snugly. Once everything fits snugly, tighten the 3 hinge plate fastening bolts hand tight. Then position the anchor plate in accordance with the hinge plate. Push the anchor plate onto the hinge plate in an upwards direction and towards the rear of the vehicle. Then tighten the anchor plate bolts. Now check the hinge plate by re-loosening the fastening bolts. Caution: the hinge plate must not move while the fastening bolts are being loosened. The hinge plate must be held in position by the anchor plate. Tighten the 3 hinge plate fastening bolts again. Tighten all 5 bolts with the specified torque. Caution: owing to production-related tolerances, measured values 1, 2 and 3 on one side do not always match measured values 1, 2 and 3 on the other side. Therefore, it's essential to adjust the 2 anchor plates independently of each other. Important: first of all, always check manually whether the folding top can be moved. Then check the electrics. Does the folding top open and close correctly? The kinematic mechanism is functioning perfectly. The last step is to seal the anchor plate fastening bolts on both sides. Finally, replace all trim and the whole rear seat.